What's up YouTube, this is GalacticGod. I'm coming at you now with another one of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Top 5s. Now in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing my picks for the most devastating old school monsters of all time. Alright, so coming in at the number 5 spot is Air Knight Parshoff. Now because cards like Heavy Storm, Giant Trinade, and Harpy's Feather Duster were so heavily played, many of the cards that you would set in your spell and trap card zone needed to be chainable. And one of the most popular chainable cards was Scapegoats. Your opponent would blast away your backfield so that they can make a summon, only to be met with a Scapegoat, allowing you to bring forth 4 new monsters onto your field. Now this would normally be a pain for your opponent to have to get around. That is, of course, unless they were able to summon a monster like Air Knight. Seeing him appear on your opponent's side of the field was always a frightening aspect after playing Scapegoats. Because now, not only were you going to take 1900 points of damage because of Air Knight's trample effect, but once they did damage to your life points, they were going to get to draw a card and start a vicious chain of plussing off of Air Knight. His ability to do piercing damage and draw made Air Knight one of the most challenging cards to get around back in the day. Now coming in at the number 4 spot is Dark Ruler of Hadas. Many of the non-tribute monsters that were played back in the day had flip effects like Magician of Faith, or had effects that activated in the graveyard. Cards like Sengen, Witch of the Black Forest, and Sinister Serpent. Typically having one of these monsters set meant even if they were able to get around it, you were still not going to lose advantage as they normally net you another card. Or in Sinister Serpent's case, it returns to the owner's hand on its own. But destroying said monster with Dark Ruler Hadas meant that it would lose out on its effect. Plus, having 2450 attack made it just that much more powerful than just about every other one tribute monster that was played back in the day. Moving on to the number 3 spot, we have Jinzo. There were a ton of powerful traps back in the day. Cards like Imperial Order, Ring of Destruction, Mirror Force, Magic Cylinder, Time Seal, Exchange of Spirits were all so powerful that they eventually landed spots on the Forbidden List. But when Jinzo was first released, there was no Forbidden List. Sure, cards might have been limited, but you could still play these super powerful traps. And the best counter to them was summoning out a Jinzo. His ability to wreak havoc on your opponent's back row was second to none. And summoning a Jinzo back then usually meant you were preparing to go for game. Coming in at the number 2 spot is a card that leads his own gang of Dark Scorpions. That's right, I'm talking about Don Zaloog. Not only did he hold artwork that was too frightening for a TCG audience that it needed to be changed, he also had a pretty good effect to go with it. Discarding cards out of your opponent's hand whenever he inflicted battle damage was detrimental to an era that heavily relied on hand advantage. Bringing Don Zaloog out at just the right moment and being able to take a card out of your opponent's hand with his effect, making him one of the most feared monsters of the old school era. And finally, my number 1 pick for the most devastating old school monsters is Yatta Garasu. Now this little bird might not look like much at first glance with its pitiful stats, but what he lacked in stats, he more than made up for in effect. Yatta Garasu has the ability to make your opponent skip their draw phase whenever it inflicts damage. And at first, being a spirit monster was thought to be a huge detriment to the card, but eventually it turned out to be one of the most annoying factors from it. Because no longer could you use a Dark Hole or Regeki on it on your turn, nor could you summon a stronger monster and hit over it. Its ability to return back to the hand only added to its formability. The way it would continually peck at your opponent's life points, not allowing them to gain resources, gave this card's effect the term the Yatta Lock. And once you fell into the Yatta Lock, usually your only recourse was to scoop it up and play better in the next round, thus securing this card's number 1 spot as the most devastating old school monster. Alright YouTube, and there you have it. Those were my choices for the most devastating old school monsters. In the comment section below, remember to let me know what you think of the choices I picked, and also let me know what your top 5 old school monsters would be as well. And I guess that's it for now. This is GalacticGod, out.